Well, good morning and or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar series hosted by Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, the University of Tennessee Institute of Ag, and specifically the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries. We are so happy to have you here, and we will first start with our welcome from our TUFC president, Neil. Take it away, Neil.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning, everybody. My name is Neil Letson. I'm the president of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, and I want to welcome everybody for attending today's webinar featuring Dr. Frank Hale. And I know, like you, I'm anxious to learn more about his topic, where he's going to tell us how to be more proactive this winter and this coming spring about pest management issues affecting our urban trees. But one of the first things I'd like to do beforehand is to say that this webinar series is this is at least the second of a webinar series that's put on by the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council and our friends at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And it couldn't be done without the support of many people. And I'd like to recognize some of those folks at this time because it has been a team effort. Joellen Diamond, who is on the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council board, Sharon Jean-Philippe, who you've already heard from, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries, and also Christy Keel Blackman, also with the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries, and lastly, Sam Adams, who's with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, their Landscape Services Division, and also Tennessee State Rep for the International Society of Arboriculture Southern Chapter. It required all these folks working together to make this possible. So the last thing I want to say is we want you to sit back, listen, learn, and enjoy today's presentation. And if you have any comments, critiques, or maybe even some suggested topics for future webinars, we want to hear from you, and you'll get more information at the end of this webinar on how to do that. So with that, I want to thank you again for attending today's webinar, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sharon.
Thank you, Neil. All right, Christy, can we go to the next slide? For all, please, we've given instructions on how to actually change your name. And if you can't figure it out using these instructions here, it's okay. If you could please type your name in the chat box, that would be great. And the one reason why we want you to type your name in the chat box is because a number of you have signed up to receive CEUs and or pesticide points. And if you totally forgot to do that, Christy, flip to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. You can please submit if you forgot to sign up and actually put your CEU number or pesticide number down. You can email that information back to Christy, and there's her email information. We will also put that email back in the chat box, so no worries. If you can't get it down now, it's fine. Christy, can you flip to the next slide for me? I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Dr. Frank Hale, who joined the University of Tennessee Department of Entomology and Plant Pathology in 1992. Since then, he has held a 100% extension appointment, which has successfully provided leadership and educational programs specifically targeting insects and mites that affect turf, ornamental plants, forests, Christmas trees, fruits, vegetables, and tobacco. With that, I would like to happily welcome Dr. Frank Hale, and we can now have him share his screen. Thank you, Christy. Take it away, Dr. Hale.
Hi, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, it's good to be here today. And of course, winter is coming and spring hopefully be around the corner too. And we're looking forward to that, of course. But there are things that we can do really year round to help manage pests. And when we talk about integrated pest management, things like that, we're talking about really a process that includes the whole year. You have to do a little planning. Okay, I'm trying to advance my slides here. Not working.
Try clicking on your screen directly
Okay.
and then hit next.
Thank you so much. That worked like perfectly. Thanks so much. UT Extension, we put some publications together and they're all online. And the one I want you to look up next time you have a chance is Commercial Insect and Mite Control for Trees, Shrubs, and Flowers. This publication it lists trees and, it starts out with things like azalea, arborvitae, and then just goes alphabetically through a number of our prominent tree species. And each tree has different pests, different insect and mite pests that can get on it. So check that out. There's lots of other information in here too. One of them you can see in the table of contents is your seasonal appearance of ornamental pests. And it kind of gives you a time frame on when these pests are going to be active, which is important if we want to be able to control them. Another new guide came out in 2017 was our first ever Southeastern U.S. Pest Control Guide for nursery crops and landscape plantings. And I think this is over 200-page publication. It's got weed control, disease control, vertebrate, and of course arthropods, which are insects and mite control. So we'll probably update this soon, but it's a great resource, lots of information. Let's start talking about one of our pests. Kind of interesting little bug. It's called a mirrored plant bug. It's the four-lined plant bug. You might have heard of the tarnished plant bug, insects like that, but these plant bugs have toxic saliva. So when they actually will inject a saliva into the plant, which will break down plant tissue, and you get these little sunken necrotic spots. And why I put this in here is that this pest has over 250 host plants. So you might have a planting bed with all kinds of different flowers and plants in there, and notice that you'll see these spots on them. In your first, you might think it was a disease, but actually it's a little insect that has, and of course, when it breaks down the cell contents, it then slurps it up through its beak. And here's just some mint here, mint plant. You can see that it's been fed extensively by the nymphs. When they first hatch out in the spring, they're little reddish bugs. And then you can see the adult has the 4 black stripes and the yellow stripes where it gets the four-lined plant bug name. So what can we do right now? Well, once the killing frost comes, we can just go in there and do some sanitation. Clip off the plants, bag them, throw them away, because the eggs are laid in the stalk residue. So if you get rid of that, you're going to have fewer of these come back in the spring. I did that to my mint plants. I just cut it down and the mint came back nice and fresh. Now I have mint for mint juleps. So it's a really great thing to do. When we talk about winter pest control, which is really right around the corner, horticultural oil sprays. These are the highly refined oils that can be sprayed both summer use and winter use. But right now, let's talk about dormant applications. We can make these once the leaves fall off the trees, the plants are totally dormant. We can think about controlling scale insects, aphid and adelgids like similar to an aphid, spruce and southern red mites, and even rust mites. All can be controlled by using oil sprays. The Tuliptree scale is a soft scale. Soft scales produce lots of honeydew, and associated with that, you often see ants that will go into the sweet honeydew for a food source. And you also see black sooty mold that grows on the bark and also on the leaves. So wherever the clear honeydew drips, you'll get this black sooty mold that will grow. So once these crawlers emerge in late August through September, later in the fall they'll change into a second, or they'll molt into a second instar nymph, and then this will be the overwintering stage. So if you didn't control the crawlers let's say in September, you have an opportunity to use some horticultural oil sprays as a dormant application. You'll see the second instar nymphs are a black color and they're a little bit bigger. Euonymus scale is another scale. This is a different kind of scale than the Tuliptree scale because it's an armored scale. Armored scales have a thick waxy covering that actually is separate from the body of the insect that covers the insect and protects it. Armored scale put most of their energy into making this waxy cover. Okay, so they don't produce the copious amounts of clear honeydew. So when we see an armored scale like Euonymus scale, first thing we notice, we don't see the black sooty mold. So that's how we can tell an armored from a soft scale. Horticultural oil sprays. This one has actually 3 generations a year during the summer. So we have opportunities to treat during the spring and summer, but also we can use horticultural oils during the dormant to help manage this scale insect. Some of that oil will get underneath the scale cover and suffocate or just break down the cell, the insect's integument and cause it to desiccate. Spruce spider mite is very important in a lot of our conifers and our needle type evergreens, you know, even the junipers. You can see here that they overwinter as little orangish eggs, little round eggs. And you'll see a lot of associated with that under a microscope, you'll see cast skins and maybe some of the eggs that have already hatched or aren't viable. So horticultural oil sprays, again, are very effective at controlling these overwintering eggs. If you haven't noticed, horticultural oil is a lot less expensive than some of these more expensive miticides that you would have to use in the spring when the active stages are there. So if you can control the eggs, you'll have very few mites hatch out in the spring and might not even need to spray. So this will save you money. Spruce rust mite is another insect that you can see here causes chlorotic needles. And these rust mites are actually active, well, they're active really in the life stages throughout the winter. So they don't just have to overwinter in the egg stage. Just wanted to show you what that looked like. Southern red mite control, these get on broadleaf evergreen plants. Here's a picture of a cherry laurel. And you can see on this one in May and June that the feeding by those mites that have piercing, sucking mouth parts will pull out the chlorophyll and you'll get these chlorotic spots. And so that leaf should be very dark green, but it's already looking an off color. The overwintering eggs are going to be on the underside of the leaves. So if we use oil sprays, we have to direct them upward to coat the underside of the leaf where in contact those eggs. Here's some miticides for spider mites in the landscape. And you can see when I came here in '92, we didn't have a big list of miticides. There's been a lot of these things that have developed since, such as Akari, Scirocco, Magus, Hexagon, Floramite, Forbid, Shuttle, Sultan. Avid's been around for quite a while. It has abamectin in it. But Scirocco is actually 2 different miticides together that you get. And so you can see here, these miticides give you an opportunity to apply miticides with different modes of action. So you might want to use one miticide 1 year and spray a time or 2. And then if you need to treat the next year, you can try something else so that you don't use the same thing over and over again. We have a habit of doing that, using it until it doesn't work anymore. But we would rather you rotate between modes of action, different miticides, so you can utilize these things for years to come. Here's that rust mite that I showed you earlier, showed you how it can make the needles chlorotic looking. these are called area-fied mites. They're much smaller than spider mites, and they are active both, during warm periods in the winter. We can use oil sprays, horticultural oil sprays in February, March as a dormant application. Or we can wait till spring or do both, but we can definitely hit them in the fall or spring with the horticultural oil, Tall Star, Avid, Akari, and Forbid. But during the dormant period, it's probably best just use the oil, because you can see the mites are out there on the needle and perfectly exposed. The eggs, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, the eggs are clear or kind of milky white, and they're much tinier than spider mite eggs. But oils will kill those too. Now come spring, there are lots and lots of pests that become active. Very early in the spring or late winter, the Granulate Ambrosia Beetle, but you have Boxwood Leafminer start becoming active, and they're inside the leaf, and things really start happening in April. Lace bugs, probably by April, they're very active. Eggs are hatching. So, and then later in the spring, you'll start seeing caterpillars and sawflies. Granulate Ambrosia Beetle is a exotic pest or invasive pest from Asia. And it doesn't actually feed on the tree, but it actually chews the holes into the tree to make a gallery to lay its eggs. It also inoculates that gallery with a white ambrosial fungi in which the larvae and the adults will feed. And when they're chewing into the tree, they will push out strands of sawdust-like frass. I call them frass tubes. And you can see wherever there's a frass tube, there's going to be a tiny, probably a millimeter or so, or even smaller hole, entrance hole. So once inside the tree, it's really hard to do anything. So at the first sign of attack, we're going to have to, or even before attack, we're going to have to try to treat them. Here's the little beetle here. This female is only 3 millimeters long. And you can see the white ambrosial fungi that is growing in the galleries already in the tree. We just split a twig open to show you what it looks like. What we like to do is put out some traps. We know one thing about these ambrosia beetles: they like to attack stressed trees, and trees that are stressed will produce volatiles, and one of those is ethyl alcohol. So these beetles have co-evolved with trees over millions of years. They know that stressed trees release ethyl alcohol, so they can find ethyl alcohol just like, somebody in Moore County can find Jack Daniel's distillery. They go right to it, and that's the trees that they tend to attack. So what we will do in the spring, I'll hang up these lingering 8 funnel traps. Put a little bag with a semi-permeable bag that has ethyl alcohol in it. It's black. You can see it in the bottom trap, sort of hanging there. And it will release ethyl alcohol and bring in these beetles. And why do we do that? Because when we get days that are 70-degree temperatures or more in the late winter and spring, the beetles are overwinter as adults. They become active and they start looking for stressed trees to lay their eggs and to tunnel into and then lay their eggs. You can actually make a beetle trap for about $4 minus the cost of the ethyl alcohol. You can just get a tube and pour grain alcohol and put a little cotton wick in there. That will do the same thing. But I do this, and then each spring when we start catching these beetles, we'll let the county agents know so they can get the word out, because protective sprays are the best. Insecticide sprays are the best route to go. And what we do, we'll spray the bark with bifenthrin, which is same as Tall Star, but we use the Onyx Pro or Onyx labels because they have a higher rate that we use for ambrosia beetles. And we want to spray the main branches, scaffold branches, the bark, and also the main trunk. Permethrin, there's a product called Astro, and you spray that on the tree. and probably do it every 14 days. I think it lasts 14 to 17 days. We get good control. If you don't spray preventatively when the beetles start flying, you can spray at the first sign of attack, but it might not be quite as effective. Okay, let's look at leaf miners. We haven't talked about leaf miners. That's a little insect that will live between the top and bottom layer of the leaf. And of course, a lot of people grow boxwood, so boxwood leaf miner is very important. So that larvae is feeding. It's actually a type of fly. The fly maggot or larvae is feeding in there, and the leaf tends to look blistered, and it will be in there for practically a full year. So it has a 1-year life cycle, basically. The eggs are laid in late April, or probably around the first week of late April, first week of May, generally. The larvae hatch out, they're little yellow larvae, and they'll start feeding in there and feed all through the summer and the fall, and actually over winter. And then in the early spring, they will pupate. The top right is the pupa. It's kind of orangish color. And then towards late April, when the pupa is ready for the adult to emerge, it will wiggle outside through the bottom side of the leaf. You'll see the empty pupal skins. And then you might see the little orange gnats or the adults flying around. They're going to mate and then lay eggs. So we can control the adults. We see them in April with the 7 spray carbaryl. We can also use ahead of that time. We like to use systemic sprays. We can use a soil drench of imidacloprid, or early in the spring, let's say in February, or we can use dinotefron, such as Safari and Xylam, in late March to early April. And this is an alternative to a foliar spray, which would be made a little later, about the time the eggs are going to hatch. But these are going to need to be systemic type products that are taken into the plant. If we wait till late April, early May, we can spray the foliage with a systemic orthene, Merit, Safari, Xylam, or Tristar, or even Mainstream and Mainspring. And these products are absorbed into the leaf and kill the larvae as soon as it hatches from the eggs. Lace bugs also are active early in the spring. Usually they hatch out before, let's say in an azalea, before the azalea even bloomed. And here's what happens if you don't treat for these in the spring. What will happen, they'll just keep feeding all spring and summer long into the fall. You'll see the top part of the plant, you'll see it just looks chlorotic because they're taking out the cell contents, and within those cells are the chlorophyll that gives the green pigment. On the underside of the leaf, you'll probably see the lace bugs themselves, plus a black shiny excrement. We call that tar spots. So controlling the landscape, what can we do? The one-time management tool would be to drench the soil in February to March with some of these systemic products like Merit, or in April with Safari or Xylam. Why a little later with Safari and Xylam? Because it's taken up into the plant very quickly, and it doesn't have the long residual, as long a residual as Merit does. Merit's in the plant it's all year, really. And in hemlock, where we treat for hemlock woolly adelgid, we're getting 5 years or so or more control with one application. So once it's taken up by the plant, it's inside the plant. We can also use a granular neonicotinoid insecticide called Arena. If we don't use these ahead of time, some people might not want neonic utilized before bloom, because some of that can go into the flowers and bees can pick that up in small doses. In that case, wait till the plant flowers and then spray the lace bugs with orthene, Safari, Merit, etc. After bloom, when bees won't be affected. When you spray a lot, you're using a lot less of the material, and it's not going to have as long a residual. Let's switch gears and talk about caterpillars. One of my favorite caterpillars is the bagworm. It has its little protective silken bag with plant material around it that it incorporates into the silk. And it's waterproof bag that it sort of carries around with it. And so while it's feeding, it will peek its head out of that bag and feed on the needles or on the leaves of the plant. Around August or so, late April, August, they'll start to mature, and the caterpillar will actually web or tie off the bag to the twigs, and then they will pupate. This is in August. The male pupa will wiggle out the bottom towards the bottom end of the bag, and the male moth will emerge. And then the male moth will find the female. She doesn't even look like a moth. She doesn't have wings. You see the dead adult female there? That's what she looks like. She remains in the bag. The male then will come to the bag and mate with the female, reach in and mate with her. She then will lay her eggs, and they stay in her abdomen, and then she dies. So her carcass encapsulates the eggs, and that's how they overwinter, as eggs inside the dead female. If you don't treat them, bagworms, when they get in those 4th and 5th instar, those latter stages, the big stages, can do a lot of damage in just a few days. And you can see here, it looks like the trees are being totally defoliated. So you really want to treat these early, usually in May to early June when they first hatch out. If you don't, you can get this kind of damage in one season. And all those little bagworms that hatched out from eggs, and there can be a couple hundred eggs in each female bagworm. So you can have literally thousands of bagworms, and you can see that's a 6'2" tall man there. And look how much damage they did in one season. So that really ruins plants. So you want to prevent that. What about other early season, even earlier in the spring and fall cankerworms? These are little inchworm-like caterpillars. They have some of the prolegs are reduced number, so they kind of do that inchworm type crawling. And these will hatch from egg masses that are laid by the female, and the female is a wingless adult moth, and she will crawl up the trunk of the tree. The fall cankerworm, the female, crawls up the tree usually around December. So that will be coming up. In the fall cankerworm would be, the spring cankerworm would lay her eggs more in the early spring. But the eggs then hatch about the same time, early spring, late winter. Fall webworms are another interesting caterpillar. This one would tend to go more into the summer. We have several generations of these. We actually have a black-headed race and a red-headed race or form. And so you might see both. And they will make webbing out on the ends of branches. We get a lot of natural biological control of these fall webworms. In places like China, where they don't have all the biocontrol agents we have naturally here, these will web up whole trees and just defoliate them. What about Conifer Sawflies? They look like caterpillars, don't they? But they're different, okay? They are actually a Hymenoptera. They're kind of like a little bee. So they're not going to be a moth or butterfly like a Lepidoptera like I just showed you. They're actually going to be, as an adult, a little bee. The number of prolegs that they have is usually 7 or 8 pair. You can see where the caterpillars that I showed you, the cankerworms, the fall cankerworms have 2, they might have 2 or 3 pair of prolegs. Most caterpillars, like the bagworm, have 5 pair of prolegs, but these sawflies will have more than 5 pair of prolegs, usually 7 or 8. Why is that important? If you want to use a product like BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, the bacterial toxin, often called, one brand name's Dipel. It won't work on sawflies, only Lepidoptera. Some other sawflies that you might see, some of them have a slug-like appearance, like the rose slug or the oak slug. Some, like the dogwood sawfly, have a white waxy material on them. These will get on some of your red twig dogwoods especially. And then a bristly rose sawfly looks more like a typical caterpillar, but it is a sawfly. So BT won't work on it. What are some other spring pests that we will see? Well, the aphids and the delgids are definitely important. White pine aphid, you'll see quite a lot. Hemlock woolly delgid, of course, is killing. It's from Asia, and it's actually killing hemlocks throughout the native range in the east. Lots of scale insects that will hatch out in the crawler stage from eggs, and of course, emerald ash borer, which is another exotic pest from China. Let's look at the Asian woolly hackberry aphid as an example of an aphid. It is an invasive pest. Fortunately, it only gets on hackberry and sugarberry, but we have a lot of those trees in our urban landscapes. And so that's not a good thing because these produce lots and lots of honeydew, and it drips on everything beneath them. So if you have a hackberry near your parking lot, near your driveway, it could drip on your car, the honeydew. If it's near your outdoor deck, your back deck, it could drip on that. And wherever you get that dripping of honeydew, you can get the black sooty mold growing. As you can see, these Asian woolly hackberry aphids have wing forms and non-wing forms. The top two show the wing form. Normally they have that white waxy material. We took a little alcohol to the top right aphid or adelgid to show aphid to show you, and just to show you what it looks like. They have little pores in their body where they extrude this waxy filaments. On the leaf, they look like little white things. And usually around August, September, we will see these things disperse. The wing forms will disperse, and that's how they spread to other trees and infest those and then lay eggs over winter. I didn't really see this happening this year, and not really sure why the population seemed to be lower than normal this year. But also we have a lady beetle called the multicolored Asian lady beetle, Harmonia axaritas. And that beetle also came from Asia, and it feeds on aphids in trees especially. And we didn't see as many of these lady beetles. Some people call them the Halloween beetles because they tend to aggregate on people's houses around Halloween and also get in people's houses. So I saw fewer of the aphids and also fewer of the lady beetles. And I think they have a predator-prey relationship that's pretty tight. Let's look at some chemical control for aphids. We can, of course, use older products like malathion and orthene, but then we have some very effective neonicotinoids such as Merit. Meridian is one I haven't mentioned, TriStar, Arena, and Safari. Safari is probably the least effective on aphids, so I would say that for other products, other pests maybe. So there are also some other insecticides that can be sprayed, such as Endeavor, Aria, Altus, Mainspring, and Botanigard is actually Bavaria bassiani, a fungal entomopathogenic fungi. So lots of different things we can use for aphids. Early season Merit soil drench is probably the best thing, especially for something like the Asian woolly hackberry aphid. Of course, oils and soaps can be sprayed also. Let's look at some scale insects. Most people don't have a clue really what a scale insect is. They tend to be stationary on the plant, don't move around a lot, and they just are kind of odd, and the general public don't really know what they are. Wax scales produce thick wax coverings over the body of the insect, and it really protects it from a lot of things, including insecticide contact sprays. Here shows an Indian wax scale. It often has a little top knot type thing. Look at the top left picture there. It looks like a little, he has a toboggan on or something. You can see a little process sticking out in the wax. The thick coats of wax. If you pulled one of these off, it'd be like chewing gum feel to it. Look on the underside, it's going to be red. The body of the insect is actually a dark red color. But you could literally peel these off the plant, which would be a good thing to do before they lay a bunch of eggs. The Florida wax scale doesn't have that little top knot. You can see it's more roundish and thick wax plates, but you can see the little nymphs here, and those would be the stages that you would possibly want to spray with an insecticide. They don't have, you can see the red body of the insect underneath and not just covered totally with wax. Of course, systemic insecticides are very effective because you don't have to worry about the wax. They're tapped into the plant. They're sucking the sap out of the plant, which has insecticide in it. And so that's why those are so effective on a lot of these pests. We've seen a pest recently over the last so many years, and crepe myrtle bark scale is a felt scale pest that also came from Asia. Remember, crepe myrtle is an Asian plant. It's been over here for a number of years. We have all kinds of cultivars, all kinds of colors of plants, sizes of plants. For every little situation you'd want to plant a crepe myrtle. They do like a lot of sun, of course. But then we didn't have the felt scale, the crepe myrtle bark scale till a few years ago. We found it first in Dallas, Texas area. From there, it spread throughout the South, throughout the range of where we plant crepe myrtle generally. We found it first in Tennessee and Germantown in Shelby County. But it's easy to spot. It makes a waxy felt-like covering that covers the reddish female, and all the honeydew that she produces, then you get the black sooty mold. So it's a black, the bark turns black and you have white polka dots. How can you miss that? When they overwinter as nymphs, and this is a little twig blown up in size. It's about the diameter of a pencil. And you can see little cracks and fissures in the bark, and that's where the little immature stages, probably second instars, are feeding in the plant. And these can actually still walk around a little bit. So they're still active on a warm day. And here it is in February 18th and 16. I brought it back to my lab and some of these started walking around. We're seeing this spread from west to east. In 2019, we found it in a lot of counties in Middle Tennessee. Previously, we found it first in Davidson County in 2018. Also, we found it in Knox County. Now, how's this going to get from West Tennessee? Well, somebody probably brought a plant from West Tennessee that had a few scale on it, introduced it into their neighborhood, into their yard. So we have it in several neighborhoods in Knox County. And we found one case of a plant being attacked this fall in Hamilton County, which is Chattanooga area. You can see that plant there was in the corner in a neighborhood in Murfreesboro. That's what it looked like when we first found this infestation. That had been there for a while, for a year or two. And you can see people drove by that countless times throughout the last couple of years. As soon as we told them that they had a scale insect, they cut the plant down. And if they treat it with imidacloprid or a systemic neonicotinoid, it might come up from roots and grow 5-6 feet in a year. But cutting it down is a thing you can do. But if you're the first one in the neighborhood to have it, coppice it at ground level, treat it with imidacloprid, and that might stop the infestation. Let's look at some other scale insects, some soft scale. We talked about Tuliptree scale earlier. Here's a pine tortoise scale. In Christmas tree plantations, you might see this occasionally. It's shaped kind of like a turtle, isn't it? and it's a soft scale, produces a lot of honeydew and lots of sooty mold then. And often you'll see in a Christmas tree plantation, you'll see one plant that's just totally black from the sooty mold. And how do they get? They might, the crawlers, when they come out in the spring, they can hitchhike on birds and squirrels. So they can hitchhike from plant to plant, and that's how it helps spread it. Horticultural oil will help control the overwintering nymphs. And early June or July, when the crawlers come out, the nymphs are going to develop in the spring, and then the adults develop and lay eggs, and you can treat the crawlers. And that's usually the best stage on a scale insect to try to control. They don't have a thick waxy covering or anything to keep the insecticide off of them. Soft scale have a thin waxy covering on their epicuticle, or their outside of their cuticle. Some soft scale insecticides that we can use include neonicotinoids like Merit, Arena, and Meridian, okay, or Safari. We can also treat crawlers with foliar sprays and insecticides. Look at some of these foliar sprays that I really like. Distance, Fulcrum, and Talus. These are not neonicotinoids, they're actually insect growth regulators. And they're safer to beneficial insects. They actually just control the immature stages. And so when that insect, let's say, molts from a crawler to a second instar nymph, it will kill it that way. So these are very safe environmentally to use. Distance, Fulcrum, Talus. If you treat a lot of scale, if you can target the crawlers, consider using these products. Let's look real quick at some invasive pests that are doing big damage in the country. Emerald ash borer, first found in Tennessee in 2010, but it was found prior to that in Detroit, Michigan. That's where they think it came in on some auto parts, probably from China. It'd probably been in the country, I think it came in about 2001 or 2002, but it could have been here before then. Trees were already dying. That's how they found it. And so when we found it in 2010, we think it had been here already in East Tennessee prior to that. This beetle can fly. So when we found it in the United States, it had already started to spread and we couldn't stop it. The larvae feed under the bark, and that's what does most of the damage. You can see what they do. The bark, they girdle the cambial tissue, effectively kill the tree within a couple years or so. You can see two larvae right next to each other. You know, some insects are cannibalistic. You generally, a corn earworm and an ear of corn, you only find one because they eat each other. But this one, they're not that way, so you can get high densities of larvae feeding underneath the bark. Here shows you what happens. You start seeing decline in the canopy. It starts shrinking. After a while, the bark just peels off the tree. You better cut these trees down fast because ash trees tend to fall quickly once they're killed. You'll see D-shaped exit holes where the adults will emerge. They'll cut a D-shaped hole and fly out from that. Then they feed in the leaves in the top of the tree, and they lay the eggs initially in the top of the tree, but then further down the tree. And you can see these trees really can't be saved at this stage. It'll costing us a lot of money when we lose all species of ash. You know, we're talking 8.7 billion trees or more. Possibly white fringe tree is going to be infected too. It's going to cost towns and cities lots of money to replace ash trees. Tennessee used to ship millions of ash trees to the Midwest. It was a major nursery product for us. Now we don't grow them at all. Even the cost to remove infested trees and treat. And we found that we can save trees, and it makes sense to treat trees that are healthy, that look good in a cityscape, that provide shade and other things, water management, of course. It helps, it makes sense to keep some of those trees alive. But most of the trees are not going to be treated. And just shows you where these have been found, and it's or spreading even out to Colorado. So this is one of ecological disaster that happens when you get invasive pests. If you want control, look up this insecticide options for protecting ash trees and from Emerald Ash Borer. It's the 3rd edition, I believe. It's available online. One of the best products is emomectin benzoate. It's a product, brand name would be Triage. It's injected into the trunk of the tree. You're going to get 2, possibly 3 years control. Costs a little bit more, but it's the most effective, especially for larger trees. Now let me talk to you about a new pest that I'm not really excited about. It's called laurel wilt because it's threatening our sassafras and spice bush. It was first found in the U.S. in Georgia in 2002. It was attacking red bay and other laurelaceae plants, and it's killed millions of these plants. You can see it also attacks sassafras, spice bush. It's a threat to avocado, of course, swamp bay along the coast. Of course, in Tennessee, we have sassafras and spice bush, so we really didn't want to get this here. It was primarily doing damage along the coast. So it's an Asian insect got over here with a exotic fungal pest, pathogen. And we don't want to spread it, so we don't want to move firewood. And we did find it in 2019 in Tennessee, in the middle Tennessee area initially. Here shows you two of the 3 Dixon County farms. And where Dr. Alan Wyndham went, he found primarily dead or dying sassafras. And so once it gets into a farm, it's going to kill a lot of plants. In one way we found it, we asked county agents, ask your farmers and growers, landowners, if you're seeing any dead trees. And that's how we kind of found. But initially it was found by Bartlett Tree in the Fort Campbell, Kentucky area and Tennessee area. It was found in July of 2019. This laurel wilt gets on the Lauriaceae, laurel family, not cherry laurel and skip laurel, which are in the genus Prunus, nor does it attack mountain laurel, Kalmia. So in 2019, we found it in Montgomery County, Dixon, Robertson, Cheatham, Williamson, and also in East Tennessee, Hamlin County. So there's apparently at least 2 introduction sites. Also in adjacent Kentucky counties, Christian, Todd, and Logan in 2019, and also Trigg and Barron counties of Kentucky, which are close by in 2020. And here's the map showing where the distribution, and you can see that it made quite a jump from Alabama or, Georgia or maybe South Carolina or North Carolina, wherever it jumped from, possibly even Arkansas, to where it is now in Tennessee and Kentucky. So how can this happen? Well, a beetle can hitchhike in an automobile, a truck, whatever, be brought in and just fly off and find some trees to attack. And again, it's an Ambrosia beetle, but the pathogen that it introduces is very, very virulent, kills the trees very quickly. Here's the causal fungi that causes all the damage under a microscope. What we see when we peel back the bark with a draw knife, we'll see the dark brown streaks in the sapwood. And that's a pretty good indication that you have this laurel wilt infection. And then, of course, that's plugging up the tree, and then it can die. The tree tends to die very quickly. Leaves will die right on the tree, just turn brown. Here's what the little beetle looks like, and we have detected the beetle also in Tennessee, but it's a very tiny Ambrosia beetle. And this is one of those pests that nobody really saw coming. It just wasn't a big problem around the world, and once it got here, it became a huge problem. Okay, I'm going to stop there and take some questions.
Yes, thank you so much for that presentation, Dr. Hale. If anyone has a question, please submit it in the chat and we will read it out for you. And while everyone is thinking of their questions, I want to remind everyone that if you need certification points for, let's see, for CEUs or for pesticide certification, please make sure your name is showing in Zoom. So if you don't have your correct full name showing on your screen, please type your name into the chat so that we can be sure to give you the correct credit.
That's great. Hey, if anybody wants to contact me later to ask questions any time of the year, check out my email address there, fahale@utk.edu. That's my office phone number. You can leave a message, but I'm on my email, every day, and too much actually. So you can always get a hold of me, and I can help you with, if you have any technical questions about these pesticides, what's to use, just give me a call or email me.
Okay, we have one question so far. I haven't heard much about thousand cankers disease lately. Is it still a concern?
It's a concern, but fortunately it doesn't seem to be spreading at the rate that some of these other invasive pests do. And I think that has to do with the actual beetle that vectors the disease is not a strong flyer. So if we can just keep people from moving firewood, it came from out west. It was from Arizona originally, Colorado, and probably people went out west when walnut trees died, cut some trees down, brought the logs home in their pickup truck to Tennessee. We found it right beside woodworkers' workshops. So if you don't move the firewood, if you don't move out of these quarantine counties, walnut, chances are it's going to be very slow moving. So that's good news.
Okay, one more question. Is it possible to take preventative measures for pests that show up in nearby states before it starts to devastate local trees?
Well, we can't just, spray if the pest isn't there. That doesn't make sense. But we do have an active survey program in Tennessee. We get a grant called the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey. It's a cooperative agreement with USDA, APHIS, PPQ, and University of Tennessee. And we look for invasive pests, 3 major surveys. One is a bark beetle, exotic wood-boring beetle survey. One's a pest of oak tree survey, and a third is a pest of field crops like cotton and soybeans. And it's about $100,000 survey, and I'm the state survey coordinator and that coordinates that program. And we have graduate students run these surveys in East, Middle, and West Tennessee. So we're looking for stuff every year. Plus, we can also apply for other, farm bill, they used to call it farm bill agreements. We can look for other type pests. So we're looking for things all the time. And you're the people that are out there all the time working in landscapes and nurseries. So you really need to be looking for anything suspicious. Let me know about it, or let your state Department of Agriculture know about it. And sometimes, we're looking for spotted lanternfly. We actually had one introduction of a dead insect came from Pennsylvania to Maryville. So fortunately it was dead and we don't think it laid eggs or anything, but it's all, pests can come in this state anytime. So we always have to be diligent. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. One more question. How can we have plant, tissue, or insect pest tested for verification?
Well, the UT has the Soil, Plant, and Pest Center located at the Ellington Agricultural Center at 5201 Marchant Drive in Nashville. And that's where I work and where Dr. Wyndham works out of. We have a full-time diagnostician, Eleanor Lopez. And so you can deliver specimens to your county extension office. There's a $15 fee for most of those specimens, but you can ship actual specimens to our lab. We also have distance diagnostics. You can take a digital image, bring it to your county agent, and they can upload for free. They'll send us the picture and the information about where you found that specimen, and we can identify many insects easily from digital images. So utilize our distance diagnostics in our Soil, Plant, and Pest Center. Information, just go to your county extension office.
Great, thank you. It looks like that's all of the questions we have for now. Neil, would you like to wrap us up, please?
Yes, thank you, Christy, and thank you, Dr. Hale, for an excellent talk. And I think the general take-home message for me is there are a lot of native pests that threaten our plants in Tennessee, and a lot of exotics and introduced pests that seem to be increasing in numbers. And from what you said, the more we understand the life cycle of these pests, the better we are at targeting our preventive and proactive measures. And for me, wintertime has always been kind of a downtime to think about this, but we don't need to let our guard down, do we? Okay, and he's muted, but
that's exactly right, Neil. Thank you.
So I want to thank you again, Dr. Hale, for all you've done to really to educate people in Tennessee and beyond. And I want to thank all the attendees that participated in today's webinar. As you know, this is the second in hopefully an ongoing series that we're going to put on a monthly basis. And we want to get the top speakers on the top topics. And I think we've been successful so far. Please subscribe to our web pages and at the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council and the UT Knoxville extension, and you'll get more information of future broadcasts. And then lastly, we do want to hear from you if you've got ideas to improve these webinars, but also to identify and sign up speakers who can talk on topics of importance to you. We want to hear from you. And then lastly, again, you've got the names of the folks that have worked hard to put these together. I really want to thank them. It takes many hands to make the load light, as the old saying goes, and these folks have really been working together well to make these webinars possible. There is a recording of this webinar, and there's a link to that site. If there's anything you've missed and you want to see it again, you can access that link. And with that, have a good day, stay safe, and plant trees.
Thank you, Dr. Hale.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoyed it.